This afternoon, I want to talk about fear, first of all, and then we're going to go on from that to talk about emotions in general and how important they are and the role they have in our recovery. So the first thing I want to talk about fear, I want to talk about it because one of the things that most easily triggers that pituitary gland that we were talking about that sets off the stress reaction is fear. Mostly when we keep our mind on the present, I am only dealing with what is going on right now. But if my mind goes off into the past, every place it goes in the past, it picks up something, a feeling. So if you're letting your mind wander off into the past, you may be picking up resentment, embarrassment, shame, regret, all of these kinds of things. And every place that your mind goes, you pick up an emotion connected with the thought. And in the future, mostly when you go off into the future, future tripping as they call it, every place that your mind goes, you pick up a feeling, and it's usually somewhere in the realm of anxiety, worry, or, one of the many names we call fear. And so in the sheets that I prepared, we talk about fear as the dragon. There's nothing can erode, eat away at the quality of your life like fear. You can have a fearful approach to life. Good things may be happening to you, but you can't enjoy them because you're worried about the second shoe has to drop. Something bad is going to happen. You can't trust, you can't let yourself count on good things happening. Bad things are probably going to happen. But of course, if we look back on it, 99% of the bad stuff we dreaded did not happen. But our minds keep creating dreads, things we dread. And in mythology, one of the old allegories, do you know what an allegory is?
Story that tells
It's a story that tells you some truth about something, told in a kind of a tale, a kind of a fairy tale type thing. Like a parable is a kind of an allegory. The allegory that's throughout all of Europe is the allegory of the dragon. And the dragon that terrorized the city. And the more the city fathers tried to compromise with it by agreeing to tie one of the daughters of the poor people, a mile away from the city, and the dragon agrees, okay, once a week, a girl, and they think they have peace in our time. And the next thing, a couple of weeks later, the dragon is prowling through the city, setting fire to everything with its dragons have fire breath, so they set a fire to the property. So then the city fathers agree 2 girls every week. And they come back like, I think we got it this time. And then like a couple of weeks later, the dragon is prowling and destroying the city again. And eventually, the city fathers, the city council decides what they have to do is they have to hire a dragon slayer. And that's where you get that myth of the legend of St. George the Dragon Slayer. And if you have ever been in England, all over England you have, St. George is the patron saint of England. And the English, all their teams, soccer teams and everything has that red cross. That's the cross of St. George. George was the dragon slayer. And the whole thing is really about the fact that you cannot let fear constantly encroach on your life because it's going to shrink your freedoms. And at some point, unless you decide you're going to become the dragon slayer, fear will paralyze you to the point that you'll barely be able to leave your room. And sometimes some of us have gotten that way, even in our addiction. We can get so paranoid that we think everything is fearful. So the book that I recommend and refer to is called Feel the Fear, but Do It Anyway. It's a great book. It's by a psychologist called Susan Jeffers. And what she talks about in the, is that one of the, okay, yeah, thanks. What she talks about is two categories in which we encounter fear. So if you look at the sheets, it says things you fear fall into two categories. The dread of some calamity, like death, illness, stuff like that, or activities that you dread. Those are the two areas that we mostly encounter fear. Activities you dread could be public speaking, it could be taking a course, it could be ending a relationship, it could be changing a career, it could be any of the things that you're going to tackle when you get out of treatment, right? And when you think about the changes you have to make, you can often have a feeling of dread about them. And so what is it you dread about, say, taking a course?
That you fail it.
Yeah, so in the second group of things down below, I fear those things above because I live in dread of the following. So if you, is there anything you're planning you have to do when you get out of treatment?
I don't really know what's happening yet.
Huh?
Not yet, no.
Not yet, but there probably are changes you're going to have to make. In certain things, it might be, you might have to get new training in something, you may have to end a relationship, you may have to find a new job, right? And so what is yours?
My fear is fear of relapse at the present time.
Oh, so fear of relapse. And if you relapsed,
I'm gonna be back with you again, probably.
yeah, and you couldn't handle that, right? Right. So no, we're afraid. The second group tells us why we fear the first group. They're really the emotional reason behind the fear. In other words, I'm afraid. I dread taking a course in some new kind of training that I might need to equip me for a job. And why might I fear it? I might fear it because I might fail. So the second group of things that she lists here are the reasons, the emotional reasons why I have the fear or the dread of these first two things. If I had a bad illness, I would feel, why do I dread a bad illness? Because I feel I would be helpless, I might be alone, I might not be able to take care of myself. These are the reasons. And then the third category that she has is I dread taking a course at a college or something because of my fear might be that I might fail. And the third is, and if I failed, I couldn't handle that. Is that true?
Well, no.
No, that's nonsense. I mean, look at the stuff we have handled, right? So here we're going around being blackmailed by this remote thing that says, if I tried this and I failed, I couldn't handle that. I couldn't get into a relationship because, why? It mightn't work. And it might break up. And I couldn't handle that. Well, yeah, you could. So we're going around treating ourselves as though should be, in glass cases or something, fragile things. Well, most of us are built like tanks emotionally. I mean, if you did to your car, which is a 12-volt battery, a 12-volt electrical system, right? If you took your car around to the back and plugged it into your dryer outlet, a dryer outlet is 220. What would it do to the electrical system of your car? Fry it. I got news for you. You've done this to your electrical system. And you're walking around like you're some sort of fragile flowers. You know, the thing that I always think is like really significant with alcoholics and addicts is when we're sober, we're like walking around on eggshells like, oh, I couldn't do that. I'd be afraid of that. I wouldn't be, you know. We've survived so much stuff. I always think of the guy in the first airport movie, you know, when the 707 jet is bogged down in the muck, and everybody, oh, you can't go beyond that specification, you can't rev it beyond that. And the guy who's the mechanic gets in, and he said, these things are built like a fucking tank, you know, and he just gooses it, and it waddles out of the muck, you know. Well, you know, as alcoholics and addicts, we are built like fucking tanks. And there's no reason in the world for us to be tiptoeing through life afraid to tackle stuff. We've had the worst stuff happen to us already, and we survived it. So, you know, to allow yourself to be blackmailed by fear. And I usually tell the story about phobias. If any of you, do any of you have phobias? Are you phobic about what?
Small spaces a little bit.
Just claustrophobia? Yeah. Anybody?
Airplanes.
Airplanes? Oh, over water or just in general?
Just the kind that go down.
Oh. my therapy partner, I think I may have told some of you this, my therapy partner, she's afraid of flying, but she's only afraid of flying over water. And she was telling me this because she was going to go to Hawaii with her kids and husband. And I'm not very sympathetic. And I said, you know, Christina, as I think about it, you're not afraid of flying, you're afraid of swimming. Because she wasn't a bit afraid of flying over land. You know, it's like what? So, you know, it's the fear of going down in water. But I mean, our fears are not rational. How many of you, any of you afraid of tunnels or bridges or stuff like that? When I was sober a few years, I was living in San Francisco and I was working in Alameda. You know the geography, right? I was terrified of bridges and tunnels. And every day, I had the Bay Bridge, the Yerba Buena Tunnel, and the Alameda Tunnel. And our best friends that we met with every weekend lived in Walnut Creek. So I had that, you know, the mother of all tunnels, you know, the Caldecott. I mean, it's like if you're scared of tunnels, you don't have to be scared of tunnels to be scared of the Caldecott. And it's so long, it's like it'll never end, you know. And I got so tired of it. I was reading a great book some of you may have read called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was this psychiatrist from Vienna who survived the camps, the concentration camps during the war. And he wrote a great book, I mean, one that every one of you would just absolutely get into. It's called Man's Search for Meaning, and it talks about surviving in the camps. And one of the things that he discovered in the camps was that a lot of people were cowering up and, you know, in fetal positions in the corners, and they hated the fact they had already lost their dignity for fear of what was going to happen to them inevitably. And he discovered a thing, or came up with something called logotherapy, and logos is the Greek word for word, logos. He called it logos therapy. And what he explained in the book, I remembered one day I was going to work in Alameda, and I'm driving on the Central Freeway, which hadn't been torn down that time, and I was about getting ready for the bridge in the tunnel, and I just got tired. And I started thinking what Viktor Frankl said, which is, you talk to the fear and you tell it you're not going to give it any power anymore. And I started yelling at the fear on the bridge. I put out my cigarette, I turned off the radio, I put away my brown paper sack for fear of hyperventilating, did the whole, I was like, okay. And I started shouting at the fear and said, come on, what is it you're threatening to do? Do it. I am not going to live with this anymore. Come on, do it right now. What is it you're going to threaten? A heart attack? Hyperventilate? I want to see you do it. And I shouted all the way through the Yerba Buena tunnel, came out the other side, shouted like a madman all the way through, effing and blinding all the way through. What are you going to do? We're going to have the fire department and the ambulance. And come on, I want to see you do this. And I have never, ever had that fear again. And when I was practicing in San Francisco, I had a lot of patients who came in from Marin, and a couple of guys, different times, had a terrible fear of the Golden Gate Bridge. And we would start off, they tried to get me to meet them in Strawberry, and I said, no, we're going to work on this. So I talked them across the bridge, and then they'd come in my office over at Van Ness and Post. And one day, this one guy, and he's driving a Beamer convertible, and he says, I'm tired, I'm going to do it, I'm ready. And he said, he shouted all the way across the Golden Gate Bridge, and he had the top down, and everybody is looking at him and thinking, what sort of a maniac is this? He got to the other side, the toll booth, and he said, I had no fear. He came into my office and he was grinning from ear to ear. He said, I slew the dragon. He said, I absolutely put a spear right down through its throat, and killed it. That's an image that you see in a lot of things. George the Dragon Slayer with the spear right down through the dragon. When there's a coin, some of you remember Patrick, who was here. Patrick had a little gold coin, which a lot of us got like for First Communion things, and it was a sovereign or a half sovereign, and on the front of the half sovereign was the picture of George on his horse with the spear and through the dragon. And this is such an important truth, I think, in our lives, is we have to recognize how much power we're giving to fear. And fear is often, and I even talk about some false truths about fear. Some people think, if you're feeling afraid, it probably means you shouldn't do it. And you'll hear people say stuff like that. You know what it more often than not means?
You should do it.
It means something you have been putting off and need to tackle. Granted, you should check it out to see it's not life-threatening, but it often means that if there's something that is looming that you're dreading doing and have been putting off, it probably means you need to do it in order to assert your freedom. Every time you start a new thing, you have to go through fear. I use the example of a lot of us learn to drive a car in a parking lot at a school maybe. And you get the steering and the braking and the starting and stopping stuff. And then somebody says to you, okay, let's go out on the street.
The highway.
Or let's go up on the freeway. Like what kind of reaction do you, it's like, don't you have that fear, right? But if you didn't go through that fear, you'd still be driving in parking lots. I'm great in parking lots. I mean, it's like, you just allow fear to constrict your life. And we have to really, get some courage. And courage just means heart, right? Cœur in French. Cœur in French means heart. Courage means you've got to get some heart. You've got to step up and defy a lot of the fears that are confining your life. So anyway, there's some false fears, and then like another one is you'll sometimes hear people saying, well, I'm going to go to therapy and handle my fear, and then I'm going to, it's like another way of putting something off. It's like, are you going to get a job? No, but I think I'm going to get a master's degree. I mean, a master's degree can be great, but sometimes a master's degree is just a way of putting off getting a job, and getting experience and getting out there in the world and stuff. We want to stay in little cocoons, and school can be one, and the family can be one, and familiar circles can become like parking lots. They're safe, but they're unsatisfying. And if we're going to get a satisfying life, we really have to expand the things and take on things that